who knows the chaos well. He is the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee as well. Congressman, with that one vote margin, any one member of the Republican majority can decide to throw the House into gridlock, though thankfully the motion to vacate threshold is now higher than one, unlike last Congress. But given this no majority, do you expect very much to get done this term?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we'll see how it begins to play out once we get seated. Also, keep in mind that usually there's at least a couple of members missing for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, attendance becomes a major issue depending on what's going on. And first thing we'll have to see is what is the Republican agenda? They control the White House, the Senate, and the House. What are they going to try to do, and how are they going to try to get it through? There may well be some issues where Republicans are so lockstep united that they'll be able to do that, but those are going to be few and far between. If anything actually substantively is going to get done, it's going to have to be done in a bipartisan way. And I think where it gets challenging is Donald Trump and the Republicans did not run on working in a bipartisan way. They ran on jamming their agenda through, and I think they're going to have a very difficult time doing that.
I think that's certainly true when you talk about the rhetoric and how they've run. But do you see any opportunity for coalition building or maybe strange partnerships across the aisle on various issues? I'm wondering if Ukraine aid isn't something that Democrats couldn't leverage this tiny majority for.
Yeah, well, I was with you on the first part of that question, not on the second part. Yes, there are things that I think we can work together on. I think on the Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers and I are in complete agreement that one of the biggest things we need to do is to simplify the procurement process so that the Pentagon can get new technologies more quickly, that they can buy software more quickly. It's a cumbersome process, and I know this is something that a lot of the incoming Trump people are talking about too. So I think we can work together to make the Pentagon more efficient and effective in terms of how it purchases the new technology and new equipment that DOD is going to need going forward. That's one. Second, Republicans, kind of are claiming that they won because they stand up for the working class. Well, let's hold them to that. Housing costs are a major problem for working class people across this country. I've got a bill to ban hedge funds from buying up single-family housing and driving up the prices and denying working class people the equity. We should be able to work together on that. Unions are crucial to helping the working class. What can we do to strengthen them? I think if we hold the Republicans to their rhetoric on these issues, government efficiency, that's something that the Democrats can get behind. So there are areas, but temperamentally, it doesn't seem where the new Republican majorities or the new Republican president are coming from. We'll see if that shifts come January and February. But if it does, there's, I think, some things that we can work together on.
But we've seen even basic, what I would call common sense, keep the government open type things. For example, the Republican majority has struggled to keep the government from shutting down, only passing those continuing resolutions with Democratic support. Now, with the margins set to be what they are and with Trump in the White House, Democrats have lent support in the past. But do you get the sense that Democrats are willing to do it going forward, or will you just let Republicans fail?
Well, it depends on what they offer. We have our priorities. We have the ways in which we would like to. What would concessions
look like?
Well, it's not a matter of concessions is the wrong way to think. It's a matter of what are we going to fund? Okay, if they come in and say, okay, we're going to increase the Pentagon by 20% and cut everything else by 25%, no, we're not going to vote for that. All right, that we have funding priorities and they have funding priorities. And, if they make an agreement that makes sense, just like last Congress, we didn't vote for every spending bill that they put forward. We didn't vote for every continuing resolution that they put forward. We voted for the ones that made sense. And I think we'll do that again. But then on the budget, the real problem is that, we have a fiscal challenge here. The country wants the budget balanced. They don't want to raise taxes and they don't want to cut spending. So anybody who's responsible for passing a budget knows that they are going to fail by the public's definition. So most people would rather not vote for it, including members of the majority. That's what makes it difficult to get to the number of votes necessary to keep doing the basic of funding the government. There's
Yeah.
just such disagreement on how to do that.
Yeah, and we've watched the appropriations process really struggle the last few years. But I want to turn to some of Donald Trump's nominations for his cabinet now. You're the ranking member on the Armed Services Committee. You talk to people in the defense sphere constantly. What are they telling you about these nominees, and how have those conversations evolved with each new twist of information, specifically around Hegseth?
Well, it's interesting. There's a deep level of concern about Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel, and there was about Matt Gaetz. You know, I mean, when you get a little further down there, the idea to bring in some tech and business people into the lower ranks, you know, Deputy Secretary of Defense, DepSecDef, the service secretaries, I think there's a real possibility to get at some of those reforms I mentioned earlier. Hegseth himself is just deeply alarming. Okay, I mean, the record makes it clear he just doesn't have the credibility to run the Pentagon. He didn't have the credibility to run a small nonprofit veterans organization. So he certainly doesn't have it to run, you know, the world's largest bureaucracy. And that's not even getting into the experience issue and whether or not he knows, you know, how to work in the Pentagon and make it work. You know, just the credibility he has in terms of the charges about how he treats women, about his, you know, tendency to show up drunk to things. I mean, that is going to cost him the credibility to run the Pentagon. I don't think he's going to be confirmed, and I am certain that he shouldn't be.
And certainly those are conversations that I've been having with senators on the other side of the building from where you're sitting. We'll ultimately see if that happens or not. But you also brought up Tulsi Gabbard, who is currently in the running to be the director of national intelligence. Are you comfortable with the notion of her serving in that role? I mean, you've served on armed services with her, in the House with her. What do you think?
No, his thing, I get along with Tulsi quite well. She was, you know, she served on the committee when I was chair. I've texted with her a few times, even since she left Congress. She's perfectly pleasant to talk to, but as a colleague of mine told me years ago, you know, nice isn't really the issue. The issue is, you know, how are they going to govern? What are their philosophy? What are they going to do? And I think there's considerable cause for concern. You know, her relationship with the Assad regime, her tendency to parrot Putin's talking points on Ukraine, all very troubling. And then add to that the lack of experience in the intelligence world. I think that adds up to a very dangerous recipe. I don't have as good a feeling for whether or not she's going to be able to get confirmed. So much of the focus was on Gaetz, and now the focus is on Hegseth. That, you know, it's like it's like the old joke about outrunning the bear. You don't have to outrun the bear; you just have to outrun the person next to you. Well, as Gaetz fell and if Hegseth falls, I suspect that then the focus will probably turn to Gabbard next.
I think you're probably right about that, though. I would love if we could all just walk and chew gum and entertain many nominees at once. But we'll see if your Senate colleagues manage to do that. In the last moment. In the last moment that we have, I just want to turn to the state of your party overall. In a video you put out after the election, you said that the Democratic Party is a broken brand and that it desperately needs fixing. What did you mean by that? And is this a policy problem or a messaging problem or both?
Well, as a starting point, I meant just that. And I'm actually having this, you know, argument a little bit with my leadership. I mean, there's a tendency, I think, of our leadership to say, well, you know, we won those 2 seats in California. We got to 215. And my goodness, if, you know, North Carolina hadn't done their redistricting, we would have been fine.
Right.
That's not the way I think we should be interpreting this election. I don't think putting a happy face on this is the right approach. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of different projects and efforts, and they don't always succeed. And sometimes they don't succeed. And, you know, it wasn't because of anything you did fundamentally wrong. Do a couple tweaks here, a couple tweaks there. So point number one is I don't think we're in that situation. I think our coalition is fundamentally broken by the way in which the working class has come to think of the Democratic Party as not representing them. So big thing number one, we're fundamentally broken. Big thing number two, the far left, their ideological approach and their ideological rigidity on a number of issues, on immigration, on identity politics, on crime, on drug abuse, I think is a major problem. And just papering over that and saying, well, we don't run on those things anymore. So it's still a problem. It's still the way the people perceives the Democratic Party. And look, I'm a progressive. I just want the progressives to update their thinking a little bit so that their message and their policies work. I live in Seattle, King County, the land of very far left government. It ain't working, okay? crime is too high, homelessness is too high, drug abuse is out of control, and government isn't running an efficient and effective way because we're prioritizing identity politics over efficiency and effectiveness. I know we're out of time, and I'm going to throw one more line at you just very quickly. They like to say in King County, we view everything through an equity and social justice lens. And I want to say, can you view maybe a couple of things through an efficiency, effectiveness, problem-solving lens? Can we get a pair of bifocals on that? I think we need to work on those things. I think it's a bigger problem than some people are saying. I think we can fix it, but not if we pretend like we don't have a problem.
I think certainly you're going to have